Adam, we are back after a few days away. We haven't done one of these since last Saturday, but since we've done one of these, we have had a chance to talk to defensive coordinator Tyson Summers, offensive coordinator Darren Shiverini, and of course, Coach Durrell on Tuesday. Also, several different players. So let's kind of get into it. Where do you want to start? I mean, there's running backs, there's outside linebackers, there's all offense, all defense. Where do you want to start here?
Well, I guess we just maybe say there's a few position battles that maybe look like they're showing results here. Obviously there's not a lot of separation. It doesn't sound like a quarterback. Cornerback, it sounds like the competition is pretty neck and neck. Even heard Christian Gonzalez is getting some reps with the ones there. And so, but at running back, I thought it was interesting that Carl Jarrell made it sound pretty definitive that Alex Fontenot is their number one guy right there, and that behind them they'll ride the hot hand. Yeah, at outside linebacker, you could kind of decipher the hierarchy there based on Carl Jarrell's comments. He mentioned Carson Wells first, not a surprise, obviously, but Guy Thomas coming in from the JUCO ranks was the second guy he mentioned. Jamar Montgomery third. He mentioned Joshka Gustav was kind of a surprise in that group until he suffered an ankle sprain. And then the one true freshman he mentioned out of that group was Devin Grant. So starting to kind of see maybe some of these guys kind of solidifying their spots on the depth chart. Obviously, we know who the starting inside linebackers are going to be. On the back end, we have a pretty good idea. So starting to kind of take shape a little bit.
Yeah, and going back to the outside linebackers, I think Durrell also kind of made it clear that, hey, he mentioned some of those younger guys, but it's really those veterans right now that are standing out. Carson Wells, Guy Thomas, and Jamar Montgomery. So I imagine it's going to be those three. Joshua Gustav, he also mentioned, has been out with a sprained ankle. So I imagine that, we don't see a whole lot of reps from the outside linebackers anyway in this defense. That, barring injury, is probably going to be Carson Wells, Guy Thomas, and then a little bit of Jamar Montgomery. Is that kind of the impression you got?
Yeah, that's the impression I got, and it makes sense. Again, it kind of goes back to Brendan Lewis not being further along because there was no spring ball, and it's going to be the same case. Jason Harris, incredible talent, but it takes time. To get this system down, and that's one of the things that Tyson Summers was talking about was some of the things that they really had to hammer these guys on last year from a fundamental standpoint. They're not having to do that, and that's because they've got a lot of veteran guys that have played football in a lot of those spots.
Yeah, and at the running back position, Alex Fontenot again coming in off leading the team in rushing last year, but Jaron Mangum had a pretty good freshman year last year. So I thought that maybe that competition would be a little tighter, but it looks like Alex has had a pretty good camp, and like you mentioned, he is that definitive number one guy right now. And if a Jaron or Jarek Broussard or a Shad Clayton has the hot hand, then you ride him for a little bit. But it's obviously Alex Fontenot.
And Alex Fontenot, if he didn't get hurt last year for that one game he missed, he might have rushed for 1,000 yards in his first year as a starting running back. I don't know if it was because he wasn't as highly regarded and didn't have the 4 stars by his name, but I don't think he gets a lot of credit from CU fans for what he showed potential-wise in his first year. He might not be a true breakaway, home run type threat, but some of CU's most successful backs in the last 10, 15 years haven't really been that home run threat. There's been guys that are able to move the chains without maybe necessarily having those 70-yard runs consistently.
Yeah, maybe we got spoiled by 1,000-yard seasons from Phil and Trayvon McMillan several years in a row. But Alex clearly, has a hold there. What were your impressions talking to Chev today, just as a whole on the offense? I mean, it sounds like that things are going along pretty well. You expect them to say that at this point in time. But what were your thoughts when we talked to Chev?
Yeah, it's until there's actually games where we can dissect some things.
Right.
Everything's going to be Pollyanna, and that's what you would expect. Obviously, he said the chemistry with him and Carl Durrell has been good. I wrote, it's great that Carl Durrell and Danny Langsdorf have this extensive history of calling plays, but that chemistry within that staff is just as important as that experience, because you can really get into a too many cooks in the kitchen type situation, and players can get confused if they don't know who to take orders from. But it sounds like the keys to this offense are in Chev's hands, but Carl Durrell obviously is gonna offer up his suggestions. That's obviously what you expected to be the case, and it sounds like that's going pretty well.
Yeah, Chev mentioned that he welcomes that, and he feels like it's making him a better coach, and that the long relationship that he and Carl have had has really kind of benefited them. So you hope that that's actually the case. And he also mentioned that he and Carl both have similar styles as far as coaching receivers. That Carl really pushed him hard as a player, and that's what made him a pretty good player at CU and drafted in the NFL. And Chev said that's how I coach guys here, and that's why we've got guys going to the NFL. So it's interesting to hear that as well. But you asked about Daniel Arias, and when I've talked to Chev in the past, he said, "Hey, he's due for a breakout season." I thought he was a little when you asked him if he's due for a breakout season. I thought he was a little more tempered in that expectation than maybe he's told me in the past. But not that Arias is having a bad camp, but that maybe, hey, let's pump the brakes a little bit. But this guy could be pretty good.
Well, he did say that he is primed to possibly be and have that opportunity to be their number one guy. So
Yeah.
uh, you can't coach 6'4", 205 with elite speed. He's
Yeah.
one of the most physically gifted guys on the team, and he's had a good work ethic. When we were allowed to go in person, he was often the last guy to leave the practice fields. One thing Chev did mention is the area that he had to improve on is not having mental lapses, and that he's improved in that. So, again, we're going to have to see that consistently out on the field. But if you talk about a guy that could make the biggest jump of anybody on this team from last year to this year, I think Arias is close to the top of the list, if not at the top of the list.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's one that I've been excited about all off season. So it's good to hear that. And I hope I didn't downplay too much, what he's been doing. It's just Chef said, when I talked to him earlier this spring, was super excited about him. I think this point in time, maybe coming off the practice field, there's a lot of things on the mind. He didn't have that same enthusiasm about Daniel, but like you said, he's a breakout candidate. He's maybe for me one of the top breakout candidates on this team.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Katie Nixon is a really good player. We just haven't seen the consistency out of him, and we talked in the past. Would like to see him maybe work a little bit more out of the slot. So interested to see how that comes together. Dimitri Stanley is another guy I don't know if people are talking enough about. Again, last year was his first real full experience out there, and he had some big catches on third down throughout the season. He's the other guy that I could see making a big jump as well at that position.
Yeah, they are loaded at receiver, and Chev mentioned it. Hey, when I was playing, we were loaded at receiver. You just kind of had to wait for your time, and that's kind of the case here. I mean, that's a guy like Daniel Arias that is now a junior. I think he's got 4 career catches, and could potentially have 10 times that in a 7-game season. So it's just kind of got to wait your turn, and that's kind of the case for some of those younger guys that we're excited about as well. So it'll be interesting to see how many of those guys get on the field this year.
Yeah, we heard Montana Lemonious Craig had a nice touchdown catch in
Yeah.
their scrimmage. There's with Vontae Chenault and those 4 2020 signees. That's a lot of talent in that freshman group, and we might not really see any of those guys much this year.
Yeah, we might not see any of those guys, and obviously fans are excited about Brendan Lewis. Maybe that whole group, maybe their time is to come in a later year. But certainly we can get excited about it. But I think there's a lot of veterans. That's kind of the main message I think I'm getting to this point, Adam. Is there's a lot of veterans that are stepping up right now on this team, offensively and defensively. Summers and Chev both talked about it.
And that's probably what you should have expected going back to the lack of spring ball, right? It's
Yeah.
it's the guys that have those reps under their belt that you're gonna trust in a season like this.
Yeah, and they're certainly leaning on those guys, and more so probably Summers than anybody else, because there's so many of those veterans on the defensive line, and like a Darian Rakestraw in the secondary. So lots of veterans that are stepping up early in this camp. Anything else you want to talk about this time, or you want to save some of that for the next one?
It's a marathon, not a sprint. We've got a little ways to go. We're not even quite to the halfway point of camp, but every day I look at that schedule, it kind of creeping down closer to November 7th. We were so starved to get back to work, and now you're kind of in that mid-camp mode where you're like, okay, now I'm ready for some football games.
Right, especially as football games are happening around the country. So, let's break down some other positions as we go on later on in future videos. But that'll do it for today.